Hello guys. Tonight I want to take you on a journey back to the rolling hills of Tuscany. To a small village called Vinci. It is the year 1452. And a child is born under the soft, golden light of an Italian morning, a boy named Leonardo. From the very beginning, there was something quietly remarkable about him. Though he was the illegitimate son of a notary and a peasant woman. And though his family life was unconventional, the countryside itself seemed to nurture his mind. The rivers, the olive groves, the gentle slopes and the birds in flight, all of it whispered to him in a language he felt in his bones. A language he would carry with him for the rest of his life. As a child, Leonardo wandered freely among the hills and streams, eyes wide open to the smallest wonders. He would watch water swirl around stones, notice the subtle way a leaf trembled in the wind, and marvel at the flight of birds as if trying to memorize the secret of their effortless gliding. In those quiet moments, he began to sketch tiny shapes in the margins of scraps of parchment. Curious lines that tried to capture what he saw. There was no pressure, no expectation. It was simply observation, a gentle communion with the world. Leonardo's father recognized the boy's curiosity. Even though Leonardo was not raised in his father's household, he was given small lessons in reading and writing, learning not just letters but the stories that came alive on the page. But Leonardo's true education came from the world itself. He dissected frogs and fish, just out of wonder, to understand how they moved. He took apart tools and toys, not to break them, but to understand their secrets. Every small motion, every glimmer of life, intrigued him, as if the universe itself were a puzzle and he was meant to be its careful observer. Even in play, Leonardo's mind was active. He fashioned kites and crude flying devices from reeds and cloth, sending them skimming across the fields, imagining what it would be like to soar above the trees. His imagination was not separate from his life, it intertwined with the earth, the air, and the gentle hills of Tuscany. At night, lying on the soft grass, he traced constellations with his fingers and dreamed of the heavens. The village children might have chased simple games, but Leonardo's games were those of the mind, patterns, motions, questions without answers, thoughts that stretched far beyond the stone cottages around him. It was during these early years that Leonardo began to realize a profound truth. The world could be known, understood, and even recreated through careful attention. He observed how water curved around rocks, how the light reflected off a dewdrop, how the muscles of a bird shifted as it flapped its wings. And he began to draw these things, not with the expectation of fame or reward, but with the quiet joy of discovery. Each sketch was a conversation with nature, each line a whisper from the hills themselves. In those days, the villagers might have seen him as peculiar, too quiet, too curious, too absorbed in his own thoughts, but Leonardo's mind was already growing in ways no one could yet measure. He was patient, willing to sit for hours, just watching the sunlight on a wall, the flow of a stream, or the angle of a branch. These hours, these quiet observations, were the foundations of a mind that would one day span art, science, engineering, and philosophy. And so, as the sun set over the hills of Vinci, Leonardo would return home, hands and clothes smudged with soil and charcoal, eyes still alight with wonder. He would sketch one last bird or leaf before sleep claimed him, dreaming of patterns, of motion, of the endless questions that filled his mind. It was here, in the gentle embrace of the Tuscan countryside, that the boy who would become Leonardo da Vinci began his lifelong conversation with the world. A conversation that would never truly end. Young Leonardo as he leaves the quiet hills of Vinci and steps into the bustling streets of Florence. The city is alive with the sounds of hammers on stone, merchants calling out their wares, and artists sketching in sunlit courtyards. For Leonardo, Florence is like a vast playground of possibilities. A place where ideas seem to float in the air, waiting for a curious mind to catch them. By the age of 14, Leonardo is apprenticed to Andrea del Verrocchio, one of Florence's most skilled artists. Verrocchio's workshop is a world of movement and creation. Sculptors carve marble, painters mix pigments, goldsmiths bend metal into delicate forms. Leonardo, wide-eyed and eager, watches and learns, absorbing everything, but more than learning techniques. He begins to understand the rhythms of creation, the patience required, the care in every stroke, and the quiet joy of seeing an idea take form under one's hands. At first, Leonardo is overwhelmed by the sheer energy of the workshop. There are apprentices older and stronger than him, tools heavier than his hands can manage, and expectations higher than the ceilings of the studio. But he has a gift: the ability to see connections others do not. While the other boys focus on copying their master's works, Leonardo studies the way light falls on a face, how muscles twist under skin, how a horse's leg bends when it moves. He sketches constantly, not just the objects in the workshop but the world outside the window, the movement of leaves in the wind, the flow of water in the street, the birds that swoop above the rooftops. Verrocchio notices the boy's talent. One day, he asks Leonardo to add the angel in his painting, the baptism of Christ. The result is astonishing. The angel's face glows with a life, a softness, a motion that seems almost to breathe. Other apprentices stare in awe. Even Verrocchio, master of many, is rumored never to have painted so beautifully again after seeing his student's skill. It is here that Leonardo begins to understand something essential, that his eyes, patient and curious, can capture not just the appearance of things, but their essence. But Florence is more than a workshop. It is a city of ideas, debates, and discoveries. Leonardo walks the streets, notebook in hand, sketching everything he sees: bridges, fountains, pigeons in flight, the intricate patterns on a merchant's rug. He watches craftsmen, not just to copy, but to understand. How does the water flow through the mill? How does the pulley lift the stone? How does the sun angle change the shadow of a column? Everything is a lesson, every small motion a secret to be studied and remembered. In the evenings, Leonardo wanders along the Arno River, where the water moves slowly over stones, reflecting the fiery colors of the sunset. He sketches the ripples, the reflections, the delicate shimmer on the surface. These moments are quiet, private, almost sacred. They teach him patience, observation, and the joy of slow discovery. And as he returns home to his modest lodging, he writes in his notebooks, not just drawings but questions. How does a bird's wing support its weight? Why does water curve around a stone? Could man one day fly like the birds? These questions, seemingly simple, are the seeds of a mind that will never rest. Even in the workshop, Leonardo's curiosity sets him apart. He experiments with paints, combining colors in new ways, exploring how light can be captured and manipulated. He studies human anatomy, asking Verrocchio to allow him to observe cadavers and bones, learning the secrets beneath the skin. Many in the city find this strange, but Leonardo is driven not by fame, but by wonder. Everything is a puzzle, and the city itself becomes his classroom. As years pass, Leonardo grows, not just in skill, but in thought. He begins to see art and science not as separate worlds, but as two sides of the same coin. Every painting is an experiment in anatomy and perspective. Every mechanical sketch is a study in balance and motion. Florence, with its vibrant streets and endless questions, shapes him into a mind that will always reach beyond the obvious, beyond what has been done, into the possibilities of what might be. And so, as the lamps in the workshop dim and the city quiets, Leonardo leans over his sketches, pencil in hand, eyes shining with curiosity. He is no longer just a boy from the hills of Vinci. He is an apprentice, a student of life, a thinker, an observer, and already, in quiet ways, a master of seeing the world differently than anyone else. Florence has given him tools, guidance, and inspiration, but it is Leonardo's mind that will turn them into wonders yet unseen. Leonardo's mind was never content with what was immediately visible. While others in Florence marveled at paintings and sculptures, he wondered about the mechanics behind them. Every motion, every shadow, every ripple in water demanded explanation. He filled notebook after notebook with sketches, diagrams, and observations, a private universe of thought that could not be confined to any single discipline. Anatomy fascinated him most. He spent hours studying the human body, first through careful observation of the living, then by dissecting cadavers in secrecy, trying to understand the intricate machinery beneath the skin. He sketched muscles, bones, tendons, and organs with meticulous precision, capturing not only their form but their function. In these drawings, the human body became a landscape, every curve and connection a testament to the elegance of life itself. He believed that by understanding the body, one could understand motion, expression, and ultimately, the essence of life. But anatomy was only the beginning. Leonardo's curiosity extended to flight, to the flow of water, to the growth of plants, to the angles of sunlight. He sketched birds in mid-flight, measuring the curve of their wings, imagining a time when humans might soar alongside them. He observed rivers as they curved through valleys, noting the turbulence and eddies that formed around rocks, envisioning canals and machines that could harness their power. In every corner of nature, he saw a lesson, a principle waiting to be discovered and understood. His notebooks also contained fantastic inventions, bridges that could fold, war machines that seemed to spring from dreams, and devices to lift water or move heavy objects. Many of these were never built, but they reveal a mind constantly testing the boundaries of possibility. Leonardo never accepted the world as it appeared. He sought the why beneath every what, and in doing so, he blurred the line between science and imagination. Even his studies of perspective and light were experiments in understanding reality itself. He would set up mirrors, lenses, and reflective surfaces to observe how light bent, how shadows stretched, how reflections revealed hidden truths. In these explorations, he was patient, almost meditative, watching phenomena repeat themselves and noting the slightest variations. For Leonardo, observation was a form of devotion, a gentle, reverent act of learning from the world around him. Yet, for all his studies, Leonardo's curiosity was not purely academic. It was deeply human. He wanted to understand not only how things worked, but why they mattered. What made a tree grow toward the sun? Why did the human eye perceive color in the way it did? How could the principles of motion in a river be applied to the mechanics of a human limb? Each question was a thread, and Leonardo pulled at these threads until vast tapestries of thought began to emerge in his notebooks. He also believed that knowledge should be interconnected. Art informed science, and science informed art. His sketches of the human body made his paintings more lifelike. His observations of water and wind informed his designs for canals and machines. Every discipline was a window into another, and Leonardo's genius lay in his ability to see the links others could not. To him, the world was a single, unified puzzle, and he was determined to explore every corner. Many people found his methods strange. While most artists focused on their commissions, Leonardo would spend days observing a single leaf or watching the reflection of sunlight on water, seeing patterns invisible to others. While scholars studied texts, he preferred to witness the phenomena firsthand. Yet, this restless curiosity would eventually become the source of his unmatched insight. He did not simply record reality, he sought to understand its principles, to anticipate its behaviors, and to recreate its wonders through both art and invention. Through these endless observations, Leonardo was building the foundation of his lifelong philosophy, that the universe is knowable, that careful attention reveals truths hidden in plain sight, and that imagination paired with observation could achieve marvels no one else could dream. His notebooks, filled with sketches, calculations, and reflections, were less a record than a living conversation, a dialogue between his mind and the world itself. And so, the boy from Vinci had grown into a man whose curiosity knew no bounds. Each day brought new wonders, new questions, and new experiments. Florence had given him a workshop, a city, and a master, but Leonardo's insatiable mind was now its own master, guiding him toward discoveries, ideas, and creations that would one day astonish the world. The seeds of his genius had taken root, and they would grow into a forest of insight spanning art, science, and invention. In the workshops of Florence, Leonardo's talent blossomed alongside his curiosity. Every brushstroke was a lesson, every canvas a question. He approached painting not as a simple act of decoration, but as a means to capture life itself. Faces fascinated him most, for in them he saw the essence of humanity, the emotions, the subtle gestures, the quiet stories that words could never fully express. One of his earliest works, The Baptism of Christ, completed alongside his master Verrocchio, revealed this emerging gift. Leonardo painted an angel whose expression was so tender, so alive, that it seemed to breathe. The other figures, though skillful, appeared almost static in comparison, and even Verrocchio is said to have been so impressed that he never painted again. In this moment, Leonardo understood something profound. Art was not simply technique, but observation and empathy combined. To paint life, one must understand it deeply. in motion, in light, in shadow. He began to explore subtlety in every form. A smile, a glance, the turn of a wrist, each nuance fascinated him, and he sought to preserve it with delicate precision. Even mundane objects became opportunities for study, the shimmer of fabric, the glint of metal, the translucence of water in a bowl. In his hands, art became a mirror of the world, reflecting not only appearance, but the hidden structures of motion, emotion, and light. Leonardo also experimented boldly with techniques. He studied the effects of light on form, trying to replicate the gentle transitions he observed in nature. He softened edges, blended colors, and layered pigments in ways that seemed to give paintings a living quality. When he painted hands, they were not static, they flexed, grasped, and gestured. When he painted eyes, they did more than look, they seemed to watch, to follow, to know. Each canvas was a study of life itself, captured and preserved in pigment. His curiosity, however, extended far beyond the human form. Landscapes, animals, and even inanimate objects became subjects of meticulous study. Leonardo painted birds with a precision that suggested he had studied the mechanics of flight. He captured rivers and waterfalls with such realism that one could almost hear the waters murmur. Every brushstroke was informed by careful observation, and every subject, no matter how small, was rendered with reverence. In Florence, Leonardo's reputation began to grow. Patrons came not only for skill, but for the insight he could bring to their commissions. He painted altarpieces, portraits, and smaller devotional works, each infused with the delicate balance of nature, motion, and human feeling. Yet, he never painted simply to please or to sell. His art was always a study, an experiment, a conversation with the world. Even in his early works, one can see the seeds of genius that would define his later masterpieces. Leonardo's notebooks are filled with preparatory sketches, studies of anatomy, and observations of the natural world, all linked to his paintings. He understood that the human body, the play of light, and the forms of nature were part of the same language, and he sought to translate that language into art. And so, while the streets of Florence bustled with life and ambition, Leonardo quietly continued his work. He walked through marketplaces, churches, and gardens, notebook in hand, sketching and observing, returning to his studio with ideas that would shape both his current paintings and the masterpieces yet to come. Every portrait, every study, every experiment was a step toward understanding the world and capturing its essence on canvas. In these years, Leonardo learned patience and precision. He learned that to observe is to understand, and to understand is to create. His hands became instruments of thought, translating vision into form, and his mind, ever restless, began to weave the threads of art, science, and philosophy into a tapestry that no single discipline could contain. Florence had given him knowledge, experience, and a city alive with inspiration, but Leonardo's vision was already reaching far beyond, toward the skies, the rivers, and the human soul itself. As Leonardo's reputation grew in Florence, word of his talent reached the northern city of Milan, a bustling hub of commerce, art, and politics under the rule of Ludovico Sforza, the Duke of Milan. Seeking opportunities to expand his skills and vision, Leonardo set out on the journey north, leaving behind the familiar hills and workshops of Florence. The journey itself was long and filled with quiet contemplation. Along the way, he sketched landscapes, bridges, and towns, recording not only their appearance but their structure, imagining ways they could be improved or understood. In Milan, Leonardo entered a court unlike any he had known. The Sforza Palace was alive with architects, engineers, sculptors, and musicians. There was ambition and curiosity here, a thirst for innovation that matched Leonardo's own. He was welcomed not merely as a painter, but as an inventor, engineer, and thinker. Ludovico valued talent that could serve both beauty and power, and Leonardo offered both. One of his first major commissions in Milan was the grand painting we now know as The Last Supper. For Leonardo, it was not merely a religious scene, it was an exploration of human emotion, perspective, and light. He studied the apostles' gestures and expressions for months, observing how subtle shifts in posture conveyed fear, doubt, awe, or devotion. Each figure became a study in psychology, each hand a gesture with meaning. He experimented with perspective, stretching the lines of the room so that the viewer's eye was drawn naturally toward Christ at the center, creating a sense of depth and focus that few had achieved before. Beyond painting, Leonardo's inventive mind thrived in Milan. He designed canals and water systems to improve the city's agriculture and transportation. He sketched plans for flying machines, war engines, and intricate mechanical devices, blending imagination with practical engineering. The Duke encouraged these ventures, fascinated by the potential of Leonardo's ideas to bring advantage and wonder to his court. Yet, Leonardo never worked solely for recognition or wealth. His explorations were driven by curiosity. He dissected corpses to understand anatomy, observed rivers and waterfalls to design hydraulic machines, and studied the flight of birds to dream of human flight. Every commission, every invention, every sketch was part of a larger conversation with the world, a dialogue between what existed and what could exist. In Milan, Leonardo also experimented with new techniques in painting. The delicate blending of colors, the soft transitions between light and shadow, and the subtle depiction of human emotion became hallmarks of his style. He learned to capture not just physical forms, but the very essence of life, the hidden rhythms that animate both nature and humanity. Even the walls and ceilings he painted were infused with this study of motion, light, and space. Life at the Sforza court offered Leonardo a rare combination of challenge and freedom. He moved seamlessly between artist, engineer, and advisor, observing courtly life, politics, and the mechanics of power. He sketched plans for fortifications, studied the movement of armies, and designed devices that might improve the lives of people both in the palace and the surrounding countryside. Every observation fed back into his art, his inventions, and his notebooks, weaving an interconnected web of knowledge. As the years in Milan passed, Leonardo's works became more ambitious and complex. He took on sculptural projects, architectural designs, and studies of anatomy that would later influence generations of artists and scientists. He understood that mastery required patience and experimentation, and he often left works unfinished, believing that perfection lay in careful observation and endless refinement rather than haste. Through it all, his curiosity remained constant. The streets, rivers, birds, and people of Milan were not merely scenery, they were lessons. And as he walked along the canals at dusk, or climbed to the rooftops to watch the flight of pigeons, Leonardo continued to dream, to observe, and to invent. The move from Florence to Milan was more than a change of location. It was a step deeper into the life he had always imagined. A life in which art, science, and wonder were inseparable, and where the mind could reach beyond the visible world into the possibilities that lay just beyond. In Milan, Leonardo's work became a delicate balance between observation and imagination. Science and art, every invention, every sketch, every painting was connected by a single principle: the careful study of the world. For Leonardo, there was no separation between disciplines. Understanding the flow of water could inform a painting, studying the human body could inspire a mechanical design, and observing the flight of birds could spark the dream of human flight. Anatomy fascinated him more than ever. He dissected corpses in secret chambers, meticulously recording muscles, tendons, bones, and organs in his notebooks. Unlike many of his contemporaries, Leonardo sought to understand function as well as form. He sketched the heart and its valves, noting how blood flowed and how each beat coordinated with the body. His drawings were not merely scientific, they were works of art. Delicate and precise, capturing the beauty inherent in living structures. But anatomy was only one facet of his inquiry. Leonardo studied water with relentless curiosity. He observed the currents of the rivers, the whirlpools that formed around stones, and the eddies at the corners of canals. He experimented with water pumps, locks, and drainage systems, imagining how humanity could control and harness this essential force. In his sketches, he drew channels, dams, and mechanisms with the same careful hand he used to paint a human hand. Flight, too, consumed his thoughts. Leonardo's sketches of wings, gliders, and machines designed to lift humans into the air were informed by patient observation of birds. He recorded the angles of feathers, the curve of wings, and the subtle motions required to maintain balance, though he knew that humans might never fly with such devices in his lifetime. The exercise of imagining, observing, and designing brought him joy and insight, strengthening both his mind and his skill as an artist. Leonardo also experimented with optics, studying how light bends, reflects, and refracts. He observed the way sunlight fell on walls, how shadows deepened in corners, and how reflections could deceive or enhance perception. These studies informed his paintings, giving them depth, realism, and a subtle liveliness. Faces seemed to breathe, landscapes seemed to extend infinitely, and water shimmered as though it were moving. In every work, the careful application of scientific principles transformed art into an almost magical reflection of reality. Mechanics and engineering were equally entwined with his artistic pursuits. Leonardo sketched gears, pulleys, and machines of all kinds, often inspired by natural movements. He examined the way water could turn a wheel, how a bird's wing could generate lift, or how muscles create motion. Each study was both an exploration and a lesson, a bridge between the physical world and the imagination. His notebooks are filled with diagrams that combine mathematical precision with the grace of a painter's hand, revealing a mind that never stopped questioning, observing, and inventing. Even architecture became a study of both function and beauty. Leonardo designed bridges, buildings, and fortifications with an eye not only for structural integrity but for harmony with the natural surroundings. He understood that a building, like a painting, should reflect both order and life, blending human ingenuity with the rhythms of nature. Through all of these pursuits, Leonardo maintained a quiet, almost meditative patience. He would spend hours observing a single phenomenon, returning to it again and again, refining his sketches and theories. Nothing was too small to merit attention: an insect's movement, a ripple in a stream, the subtle twist of a muscle. Each observation was a lesson, each sketch a step closer to understanding the interconnectedness of the world. By blending art and science, Leonardo created a unique vision. Paintings became studies in anatomy and perspective. Machines and inventions were informed by natural principles. Every discipline reinforced another, and the boundaries between them blurred. To Leonardo, life itself was a canvas. Every movement a brushstroke, every interaction a lesson in beauty and function. And so, in the quiet corners of his studio, amidst sketches of water wheels, flying machines, and human muscles, Leonardo worked tirelessly. Science and art were inseparable threads in the tapestry of his mind. Each discovery, each experiment, each carefully observed detail was a note in the symphony of his genius, a symphony that would continue to grow, eventually touching every field he explored, and leaving a legacy that would endure long after his time. Leonardo's mind and hand had reached a level of harmony few had ever seen. Every observation, every experiment, every sketch fed into his art, and his art, in turn, fed into his studies. It was during this period that he created some of the works that would secure his place in history, paintings that are still admired, studied, and marveled at centuries later. Perhaps the most famous of these is the Mona Lisa, painted in Florence after years of study. The portrait embodies everything Leonardo had learned about light, anatomy, perspective, and the human soul. Her smile, gentle and elusive, seems to change when one looks from different angles, and her eyes follow the viewer with a lifelike gaze. Leonardo captured not merely a face, but a consciousness, a presence that feels aware, curious, and quietly alive. The landscapes behind her, winding rivers and distant mountains, are not just backgrounds but reflections of nature's order, light, and mystery. In creating such masterpieces, Leonardo applied the same principles he had explored in his notebooks. He softened edges to mimic the gradual transitions of light, studied the play of shadows to create depth, and observed subtle gestures to convey emotion. Every element, no matter how small, was considered with care. Even the tiniest wrinkle of a sleeve, the curve of a hand, or the flicker of a reflection in water was meaningful, contributing to the painting's overall harmony. But Leonardo's genius was not confined to portraiture. The Last Supper, painted on the wall of the convent of Santa Maria delle Grazie in Milan, demonstrates his understanding of movement and narrative. He arranged the apostles in groups, capturing reactions to Christ's words with astonishing realism. Each figure is distinct, each gesture meaningful, each expression alive. The painting is not only a religious story, it is a study of human emotion, psychology, and interaction. Even his unfinished works reveal brilliance. Leonardo often left paintings incomplete, not from laziness, but from his relentless pursuit of perfection. In these unfinished canvases, one can see the layering of thought, the careful study of anatomy, and the experimental techniques he applied. They are windows into his mind, offering glimpses of genius in motion, ideas captured mid-creation. Leonardo's sculptures, though fewer in number, also reflected his meticulous study of life. Horses, human figures, and anatomical models were rendered with such precision that they almost seemed ready to move. Even when the marble was cold and unmoving, Leonardo's understanding of anatomy, motion, and proportion infused his creations with life. His notebooks remained central to his process. Studies of water, flight, muscles, and mechanics informed every brushstroke, while his artistic experiments inspired his scientific inquiries. Leonardo's mind did not separate art from science. Every line in a painting, every sketch in a notebook, every observation in nature was part of a unified exploration of the world. Leonardo also experimented with new techniques in fresco and oil painting, pushing the boundaries of color, texture, and light. He sought to capture not just the appearance of reality, but its underlying rhythms, the way light dances across surfaces, the subtle interplay of shadow and form, and the imperceptible expressions that reveal a person's thoughts. In doing so, he elevated painting from craft to something resembling living thought, immortalized on canvas. As he worked, Leonardo continued to observe the world with the same curiosity that had marked his childhood. Birds in flight, water in motion, plants in bloom, human expressions, the gentle tilt of sunlight, all became lessons, inspirations, and subjects of study. His genius was not born from talent alone, but from a life spent in relentless observation, reflection, and experimentation. By the time he completed his masterpieces, Leonardo had achieved something extraordinary. He had learned to see the world as it truly was, and then to translate that vision into art that could endure for centuries. Every painting, every sketch, every study was a testament to a mind that sought understanding in all things, that sought harmony between nature, humanity, and imagination. His works were not only beautiful, they were alive, breathing with the subtle rhythms and wonders of the universe he had spent a lifetime observing. As Leonardo grew older, his restless mind carried him from city to city, seeking new patrons, new challenges, and new horizons for his endless curiosity. Florence, Milan, Rome, and eventually France became stages for a life devoted not only to art, but to the relentless pursuit of understanding. In each city, he observed, sketched, experimented, and created, leaving traces of his genius wherever he went. In Florence, he returned to the familiar streets and workshops that had nurtured his youth. Here, he continued painting, though often distracted by inventions, studies of anatomy, and philosophical reflections. Patrons came seeking his artistic mastery. Yet Leonardo's attention was frequently divided, pulled toward the intricate mechanisms of motion, the study of water, or the challenge of designing a more elegant bridge or canal system. Even as commissions arrived, his mind wandered, exploring the invisible patterns that govern the world. Rome offered a new stage. The city, rich with ancient architecture and art, inspired him to study not only painting, but the achievements of civilizations long past. He sketched ruins, analyzed columns, measured arches, and marveled at the engineering of aqueducts. Rome reminded him that human ingenuity has always sought harmony with nature, and he drew inspiration from the interplay of art, science, and history. Despite the acclaim he received, Leonardo often left works unfinished, moving from one project to another as curiosity dictated. He sketched plans for ideal cities, designs for flying machines and mechanical devices, and studies of the human body that remained incomplete. Yet even in these unfinished works, the depth of his vision is evident, a mind constantly exploring, refining, and questioning, always seeking to push the boundaries of what could be known or imagined. His time in Venice allowed him to observe water in new ways. The canals, tides, and flooding of the city fascinated him, leading to designs for locks, bridges, and hydraulic systems. He combined careful observation with innovative imagination, sketching machines that might control or manipulate the movement of water. For Leonardo, Every natural phenomenon was an opportunity to understand the principles that govern the world and to apply them creatively. In his later years, Leonardo was invited to France by King Francis I, who admired the artist, engineer, and thinker. There, Leonardo spent his final days in a serene estate near Amboise. The French countryside, with its gentle rivers and rolling hills, offered a quiet refuge where he could continue to observe, draw, and dream. Even as age crept in, his mind remained alert, weaving together reflections on art, science, and life itself. During this period, Leonardo focused more on teaching and sharing his insights with young artists and inventors. He dictated notes, explained principles, and demonstrated techniques, ensuring that his observations would ripple outward long after his lifetime. Though his body weakened, his spirit of inquiry never faltered. He still sketched, still watched birds in flight, and still studied the patterns of water and wind with the same patient attention that had marked his childhood in Vinci. Throughout his travels, Leonardo maintained a remarkable balance between the practical and the imaginative. His mechanical sketches could become tools of war or instruments of engineering. His paintings captured both emotion and anatomy. His studies of nature suggested inventions centuries ahead of their time. In every city, in every sketch, in every unfinished page of his notebooks, the constant thread was Leonardo's insatiable curiosity, a desire to understand and to recreate the world in all its complexity and beauty. Even as he aged, Leonardo continued to dream of possibilities beyond his immediate reach. He imagined flying machines soaring above valleys, water diverted to irrigate fields, bridges spanning impossible distances, and human anatomy understood in every detail. The world, for Leonardo, was never fixed. It was a living puzzle, constantly revealing new patterns, new principles, and new wonders to be explored. And so, in the quiet of the French countryside, surrounded by gentle rivers, forests, and skies filled with birds, Leonardo spent his final years as he had spent his entire life, observing, sketching, dreaming, and seeking to understand. Every moment was an experiment, every sketch a question, every thought a journey toward the mysteries of life and nature. His legacy was already unfolding, in notebooks, paintings, and ideas, ready to inspire generations long after he was gone. As Leonardo grew older, he spent more time in quiet contemplation, reflecting on a life that had been both extraordinary and restless. The canvases, sketches, and inventions that surrounded him were not merely accomplishments, they were conversations with the world. Testaments to a mind that had never ceased to question, observe, and imagine. In these reflections, he considered not only what he had created, but what it all meant, the connection between art, science, nature, and humanity itself. He pondered the human condition, the fragility of life, the fleetingness of beauty, and the enduring power of knowledge, in the smallest details of a leaf or the curve of a human hand. Leonardo saw the same principles that governed the cosmos. Each brushstroke, each sketch, each careful study was a meditation on the harmony of creation, a quiet understanding that nothing exists in isolation. Nature, humanity, and imagination were threads woven into a single fabric, and he had spent a lifetime unraveling and examining them. Leonardo also reflected on the purpose of learning and creation. Knowledge, he realized, was not only to be acquired but to be applied, shared, and celebrated. The observations in his notebooks, whether of anatomy, mechanics, or flight, were seeds meant to grow long after he was gone. He understood that genius is not measured by the number of completed works, but by the depth of insight and the capacity to inspire others to see the world differently. In his philosophical musings, Leonardo considered the impermanence of life. Cities would change, rulers would rise and fall, paintings would fade, and inventions might never be realized. Yet the pursuit of understanding, the habit of careful observation, and the delight in discovery, these endure. It was this principle that guided his work, that the mind, when engaged fully with the world, can leave traces that transcend time. Even as he looked back on a life filled with wonder, Leonardo remained forward-thinking. His sketches of flying machines, studies of anatomy, and designs for mechanical devices were not solely for his own era. They were questions posed to the future. What can humans achieve if they observe, experiment, and imagine without limit? How far can curiosity carry the mind? These were the questions Leonardo left behind. quietly, on pages of parchment, in the margins of his thoughts, and in the depths of his art. He also reflected on the unity of disciplines. Art, science, engineering, and philosophy were not separate endeavors, they were different languages expressing the same truths. The beauty of a painting, the precision of a mechanical device, the intricacy of a human hand, and the flow of a river were all part of a universal harmony. By exploring each field with equal rigor and wonder, Leonardo glimpsed the interconnectedness of all knowledge. Amid these reflections, he remained deeply human. He felt the joys and sorrows of life, the pleasures of discovery, the satisfaction of creation, and the inevitable pangs of imperfection. He observed people with empathy, studied expressions with curiosity, and sought to capture the essence of both nature and humanity in everything he touched. His legacy, he realized, was not simply his art or inventions, but the mindset he cultivated, the relentless curiosity, the patience of observation, and the courage to dream beyond what seemed possible. Leonardo also cherished the simple pleasures that had shaped him from childhood: the flight of a bird, the shimmer of sunlight on water, the gentle motion of trees in the wind. These small wonders were as instructive and inspiring as the grand projects and masterpieces of his later life. They reminded him that the world, in all its complexity, can be understood through patience, attention, and reverence. And so, Leonardo's reflections formed a quiet testament that life is measured not only by what we accomplish, but by how we see, how we question, and how deeply we engage with the world around us. His sketches, paintings, and writings were not merely tools, they were invitations to observe, to imagine, and to understand. Through them, he left a path for future minds to follow, a gentle guidance toward curiosity, creativity, and wisdom. In the quiet of the French countryside, Leonardo's life gradually drew toward its close. The sun rose and set over the gentle slopes of Amboise, painting rivers and fields with golden light, just as it had illuminated the hills of Vinci so many decades before. Even in his final days, Leonardo's mind remained alive, attentive, and curious, tracing patterns in nature, reflecting on humanity, and dreaming of possibilities that would outlast his own lifetime. He had lived a life devoted to observing, understanding, and creating. Canvases, sketches, machines, and inventions surrounded him, each one a testament to his restless curiosity. Yet he remained humble before the vastness of the world, aware of how much still lay undiscovered. The patterns of wind through leaves, the curve of a river, the subtle motion of a bird in flight, these continued to fascinate him, as they had since childhood. In his heart, Leonardo knew that life itself is the grandest canvas, the ultimate puzzle, and the greatest source of wonder. King Francis I visited him often, marveling at the breadth of his mind. Leonardo spoke quietly, sharing his thoughts on art, science, nature, and human ingenuity. He showed sketches of flying machines, bridges, water systems, and anatomical studies, each a piece of a lifelong quest to understand the harmony and structure of the world. Though the king admired the genius of his creations, Leonardo valued the pursuit of knowledge for its own sake, the simple joy of learning, observing, and imagining. As the days passed, Leonardo reflected on the interconnectedness of all things he had studied: art and science, mechanics and anatomy, nature and human emotion. They were not separate, but different expressions of the same universal truths. He had spent a lifetime tracing these threads, seeking patterns, capturing movement, and preserving knowledge for the future. His legacy, he realized, would endure not merely through objects or inventions, but through the mindset of observation, curiosity, and wonder that he had cultivated and shared. Even in his final moments, Leonardo's mind lingered on the details of the world. He considered the intricate musculature of a hand, the flight of birds against the sky, the gentle motion of water over stones, and the way light touched every surface with subtlety and grace. Each observation was a reminder of life's delicate balance, its beauty, and its endless mysteries. Leonardo passed quietly, leaving behind a world enriched by his vision. His paintings, sketches, notebooks, and inventions continued to inspire generations, offering insights into art, science, engineering, and the human spirit. The Mona Lisa still smiles enigmatically. The Last Supper still conveys the depth of human emotion. and countless notebooks reveal the mind of a man who sought to understand the universe in its entirety. Yet the true echo of Leonardo da Vinci is not only in the works he left behind, but in the example he set, a life devoted to curiosity, observation, and imagination. He reminds us to notice the small wonders of the world, to ask questions, to blend art with science, and to pursue understanding with patience and reverence. He teaches that genius is not merely talent, but the persistent willingness to observe, to learn, and to dream. And so, as the sun sets over the French countryside, as rivers flow and birds take flight, the spirit of Leonardo da Vinci lingers in the quiet details of the world. His life was a bridge between art and science, imagination and observation, curiosity and creation. Though he is gone, the questions he asked, the wonders he observed, and the insights he shared continue to whisper across centuries, inviting every mind to look more closely, to wonder more deeply, and to create with both care and courage. In this way, the boy from Vinci, who once wandered hills and sketched birds in flight, remains alive, not in flesh, but in thought, in discovery, and in the enduring human desire to understand the world around us.